Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this event that highlights leaders for the built environment. On behalf of the event partners, USDA Forest Service, Softwood Lumber Board, Woodworks, Net Impact, Impact Finance Center, and Dovetail Partners, I welcome you. I am Katie Fernholz, President of Dovetail Partners, an environmental nonprofit think tank based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My pronouns are she and her, and I am joining from the ancestral lands of the Dakota people, who continue to steward this land that I also call home. I am excited that you are here today for an event exploring the role of mass timber in creating more resilient and climate-friendly built environments. We will be talking about leadership, partnerships, and many paths toward a shared goal of sustainability. To begin our time together, we will be hearing from leaders within the U.S. federal government, starting with the U.S. Department of Agriculture Deputy Secretary, Dr. Jewel Bronaugh. We will also hear about the leadership impacts of the Softwood Lumber Board, working throughout the U.S. and Canada with Kees de Jager, President and CEO of the Softwood Lumber Board and the Binational Softwood Lumber Council. And of course, it all starts with the forest. And we are honored to have the Chief of the Forest Service, Chief Randy Moore, here to speak with us. Later in our agenda, you'll have seen that we have panels led by Microsoft and Walmart. We look forward to hearing their insights and experiences as leaders, influencers, and innovators in this space. Finally, our agenda includes Dr. Edie Sonny Hall with an overview of carbon science and insight into what we already know about the benefits of forests and forest products, and where research continues to generate greater understanding. Lastly, Jennifer Cover, President and CEO of Woodworks, will tell us about trends in mass timber construction and the free assistance available from her organization to support your next project. Jennifer will also lead us into the fun capstone of our time together, networking. We chose this hop-in platform so that we make sure there's a fun and effective way for us to connect. I am grateful that you are here and look forward to the outcomes of our time together. With this gathering today and with the event partners, I am asking you to investigate, explore, and select mass timber as a building solution to support your sustainability goals, and in recognition of the essential connection between our built environment and the health of our natural environment. It is now my honor and pleasure to introduce the U.S. Department of Agriculture Deputy Secretary, Dr. Jewel Bronaugh. She will further set the stage for this event and our shared call to action. As someone who's raised on a farm in West Central Minnesota and who's worked in the forest sector for over 23 years, I am grateful for the full range of good work done by the USDA to support innovation and communities throughout the country. Deputy Secretary, Dr. Bronaugh, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And just thank you to everyone for joining us today for this National Forest Products Week event, highlighting how innovative wood construction can enhance forest management and support our priorities in attacking climate change. And I also want to thank Chief Moore from the U.S. Forest Service for joining as well. During National Forest Products Week, we celebrate the wealth of products and benefits our forests provide, and we recommit ourselves to wisely and sustainably stewarding them to meet our nation's needs both now and into the future. America's forests are vital to our nation, its people, and the economy. Regardless of where we live, whether in cities, towns, or rural areas, forests are important to our daily lives. Our forests provide renewable raw materials and energy, wildlife habitat, clean air, and clean water for the benefit of millions of Americans. Today's event brings together corporate leaders from Microsoft and Walmart who will share their work about using mass timber on their campuses as a sustainable choice that creates incredible places to work. On behalf of the USDA and the Forest Service, thank you to our partners at Dovetail Partners, the Softwood Lumber Board, Woodworks, and Net Impact for their strategic planning to make this event today a reality. Today's program will highlight mass timber and cross-laminated timber, the leadership of this sector and how it supports federal, state, and private natural resource management for economic goals. Recent wildfires and other forest health challenges highlight the need to find innovative solutions within the built environment that support more resilient forests and climate mitigation strategies. Since 2014, we have worked with the Softwood Lumber Board and other partners to demonstrate and stimulate wood construction and green building in the United States. In mid-September, we signed a new MOU with the Softwood Lumber Board. Together, we will build on our past successes, work to expand markets for wood products, elevate awareness of carbon benefits from wood, and increase the pace and scale of mass timber construction in the United States. Our goal with this event is to spur new relationships, catalyze a higher level of investment in mass timber construction, and support corporate sustainability goals alongside federal, state, tribal, and private natural resource management goals. While celebrating our forests during National Forest Products Week, we must also acknowledge they are under duress. Climate change is increasing the severity and frequency of wildfires. Fire seasons are now fire years. Our brave wildland firefighters are working tirelessly to protect lives and property while encountering fire conditions that grow more dire each year. To confront the climate crisis and the wildfire, disease, and insect challenges facing our forests, we are taking action. We are working to expand the pace and scale of forest products to reduce hazardous fuels and create fire-resilient lands. We are working across boundaries with states and tribes on programs like shared stewardship to plan and execute management activities. We're using an all lands approach to advance our efforts since fire has no boundaries. We are also investing in wood products and wood energy to help secure an environmentally sustainable economy. And today we're announcing approximately $13 million in new funding opportunities to support market innovations in wood products and wood energy. The USDA Forest Service has 2 funding opportunities that are now open: the 2022 Wood Innovations Grant Program and the 2022 Community Wood Grant Program. These grants are designed to develop and expand the use of wood products and strengthen emerging wood energy markets that support sustainable forest management, particularly in areas of high wildfire risk. The Wood Innovations Grant Program has a long track record of success and strengthens and accelerates emerging markets for innovative wood products like mass timber and cross-laminated timber. Healthy and productive markets for wood products and wood energy are integral to supporting sustainable management and improving conditions of our nation's forests. The Community Wood Grant Program helps support the cost of installing wood energy systems or building innovative wood product facilities. Since 2015, the Community Wood and Wood Innovation Grant Programs have provided more than $62 million of funding to 288 recipients to support wood products and wood energy projects. The application period for both grant programs closes on Wednesday, January 19th, 2022. And finally, I have a very exciting announcement. We are also partnering with the Softwood Lumber Board to support a new mass timber competition. The Forest Service is providing $1 million to the Softwood Lumber Board for a special competition that will help support and expand the mass timber supply chain in the United States. This is an exciting new collaboration, and I will let the Softwood Lumber Board CEO, Kees de Jager, share the details about this new competition with you in a few moments. I just want to say thank you to all of our speakers and presenters today. Mass timber can support many of our mutual goals that include climate change, healthy fire-resilient forests that protect our communities, healthy buildings where we work and live, and rural economic health. Let's keep working together to accomplish our goals. And I say thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And I will turn it back over to our guide for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, bravo. How exciting. The announcements and the news that we'll hear more about. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Brana. Your comments are greatly appreciated. Happy National Forest Products Week to us all, and you have grounded us in this work. We're excited about the announcements you shared, and thank you for the continued investment in collaborative innovation. Next, we will hear from Kees de Jager, President and CEO of the Softwood Lumber Board and the Binational Softwood Lumber Council. Goedemorgen, Kees, en bedankt dat je hier bij ons kunt zijn. For those of you that don't speak Dutch, good morning, Kees, and thank you for being with us. And I do want to honor your Dutch heritage, not only because the Netherlands are special, but also because of the known and demonstrated leadership of the Dutch. Perhaps not known as the largest country in terms of geography, yet the Netherlands is a global powerhouse for trade, commerce, innovation, and sustainability. Thank you for lending this heritage of leadership to the work of the softwood lumber sector throughout the US and Canada, and thank you for joining us today. I know you have some details to share with us, Kees. Mr. de Jager, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katie. Dankjewel. I am not wearing my wooden shoes today, so that's not part of the announcement. And thank you, Deputy Secretary Brana, for your announcement today. This is yet another example of the department's leadership in changing how America builds for the better using sustainably harvested wood products. As mentioned, I'm here on behalf of the Softwood Lumber Board, an industry-funded initiative established to promote the environmental and economic benefits and uses of softwood lumber products in construction. Wood construction's embodied and embedded carbon benefits offer the building sector a viable and credible path to net zero. Since 2012, the SLB has made strategic investments in a wide variety of initiatives that help the construction sector reduce its environmental footprint. Those investments have generated over 8.8 billion board feet of demand. That's good for the economy and the environment. Our efforts have achieved a carbon savings of 20.5 million metric tons, the equivalent of 4.3 million cars off the road for a year. But there's more that can and should be done. With 17,000 commercial and multifamily buildings built annually in the US, there's a significant potential to improve the carbon footprint of the built environment by using wood-based building systems such as mass timber. Strong public-private partnerships are important to accomplishing this. The SLB and USDA's partnership stems back to 2015 when we signed an MOU that ushered in a wave of innovative joint initiatives and investments. One of these was the Tall Wood Building Competition, a key driver of the mass timber movement and the progress we see in the market today. Competitions are not just symbolic or theoretical. The energy and momentum created back in 2015 is still benefiting the market today. For example, the 25-story Ascent project in Milwaukee leverages research funded through that original competition. And as the Deputy Secretary mentioned, building on this and numerous other successes, the SLB and USDA renewed our MOU last month. And I'm pleased to announce the first new joint initiative under that agreement. We are launching a $2 million mass timber competition, Building to Net Zero Carbon, which will support the design and construction of high-profile projects that are repeatable and scalable. Multiple grants will be awarded up to $500,000 each. Eligible building types include commercial, institutional, industrial, educational, mixed use, and affordable multifamily housing developments. The competition aims to showcase the viability, cost effectiveness, and carbon reduction and sequestration properties of mass timber construction. It would also provide lessons learned and research findings, including whole building LCAs, to help support future mass timber projects. Ultimately, the competition will help grow the market for mass timber and strengthen the domestic mass timber supply chain. We look forward to receiving proposals early in the new year and anticipate selecting the winners in late spring or early summer. I invite you all to visit softwoodlumberboard.org/net-0 for more information. With that, Katie, back to you.
Thank you, Case. Your work and the actions and impact of the Softwood Lumber Board are greatly appreciated. Now, let us remind ourselves of where this work begins. It all starts with the forest. We're going to hear from the Chief of the U.S. Forest Service, Chief Randy Moore. Welcome, Chief Moore. We are honored to have you with us today and to recognize the work and beneficial impact of the Forest Service across all forest lands, as your agency has programs that range from national forests to state and private forests, tribal forest partnerships, and also urban forest stewardship. The work of the Forest Service and your partnerships are integral to the forest and forest product sectors and communities throughout the country. Chief Moore, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Katie, and also Deputy Secretary Bernal. It's a pleasure to be on with you as well as yourself, Case. You know, today is about the opportunity for corporations to choose wood-based construction to meet the environmental sustainability goals they have.
And I apologize for interjecting, Chief Moore. Your video isn't working. Are there any troubleshooting ideas on your end why we might not be able to see you? If you're like me, you have a Post-it note over the camera. I'm teasing, Chief Moore, but you can push.
No, there's no Post-it note, and my camera sets its own. So I'm not real sure, Katie.
Well, go ahead and share your comments. I'd ask the IT, you can take me off screen, but please go ahead and share your comments, Mr. Chief Moore, excuse me. Please go ahead. Apologies for interrupting.
Okay, no problem, and I apologize that the camera's not working. So let me just say thank you all for joining today, and we stand with you in supporting our shared goals that we have in terms of the built environment. As you all know, the Forest Service has worked with partners to develop mass timber and cross-laminated timber technologies since 2014. And so today, you know, we're taking another step by announcing new funding through our Wood Innovations Grant and Community Wood Grant. So I really appreciate Deputy Secretary Bernal making that announcement. We're very proud of it. We're also proud to partner with the Softwood Lumber Board on a new competition, which I had mentioned earlier. You know, market growth for mass timber building has helped spur 12 new timber and CLT plants in the U.S. since 2015. And this has created markets across federal, state, and private land ownerships. Our scientists and engineers from the Forest Products Laboratory has helped lay the foundation for mass timber and building codes. We continue our research and development work on creating new products for small trees, which is what we have on our national forests and groves, actually. The progress that we've made together in mass timber is really nothing short of amazing. You know, when I look back since 2014, when we first got involved, there were just a handful of mass timber buildings in the U.S. And as of this month, there's over 550 buildings constructed and another 650 in design or under construction. We're providing funding to WoodWorks to provide education and free project assistance to support this construction. And they're serving as a catalyst for growth. WoodWorks is also partnering with us to support applied research, life cycle assessments, and building sustainability. The Forest Service is also invested in mass timber construction. Our first internal CLT building is nearing completion, and it's on the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest in Idaho. Mass timber, as you all know, is helping us to choose building materials with net zero carbon emission while also storing wood and wood products. Storing carbon and wood products, sorry. We're evaluating the use of mass timber as we replace buildings lost to wildfires. And speaking of wildfires, you know, our mission is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forested grasslands to meet the needs of present and future generations. Americans depend on the nation's forests for so much, things like clean air, water, habitat for native fish, wildlife, wood for lumber and other products, opportunities for recreation, and more. Our job is to help keep forests healthy for everything that people need. And as you know, as I mentioned, all of those products and byproducts and the things that Americans depend on, one of the biggest threats to those needs are catastrophic wildfires. It's actually presented the greatest challenge to our forests, particularly in the West. Over the past 20 years, we've seen growing fire size, we've seen more extreme fire behavior, and we've seen seasons that are no longer seasons, but they're years now. So seasons has turned into years. Extreme fire weather, we're seeing record-shattering heat. We're seeing a lot of our tender dry fuels. We're seeing weather fronts that are stalled. We're seeing hot and dry winds, and we're seeing lightning bursts in unusual places. When I look back in the West, and if I just take California as an example, we've had 2 very significant years where lightning drops has really created conditions out on the landscape that was just untenable. And so we're seeing this with more of a frequency these days, and it's creating fire conditions out there like none of us have seen in our careers. Records, the size of fires are at record levels. The rate of spread is just astronomical, really. And when I look at the area that it involves, it's really not only just the West Coast, but it's also in the Central Rockies. And I think we can safely say it's really across the entire West. Now, the cause of this fuel buildup in many of our forests are due to our success over the last 100 years in suppressing fires across the country. When we made that decision back in the early 30s, it was the right decision at the time. And we've had about a 98% success rate since that time. And so while it was the right decision at that time, we're seeing the consequences of the success of that decision now. And so I would say that it's time to make a different decision based on what we're seeing as a result of the decisions that's made almost 100 years ago. And so the solution in and of itself is really to step up the pace and scale of our fuels and forest health treatments in the West, really to match the scale of wildfire risk to homes and communities. And we think that healthy forests will reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfires, making communities safer and more resilient. Our investment in wood products, research and markets development can help us use the material that we need to remove the reduced wildfire risks that we're seeing across the country. And it's products like CLT and glue laminated beams, which allow us to use small and medium-sized trees that support the wood product industry, but it also helps us remove the hazardous fuel from our forests, thereby making them a lot more resilient and healthy. Now, we also know the importance of industry partnerships in achieving this goal. We look forward to working together to find new opportunities for markets, products, and we also look for new opportunities to do forest thinning and do more forest harvesting. So, Katie, I'll turn it back to you and listen in to see if there's any questions that we can respond to, or just how would you like for us to engage?
Absolutely, Chief Moore. Thank you very much. I'll invite Case back to the stage and we'll have a little discussion, but thank you. It may just be the forester in me, but the reminder of how choices made 100 years ago impact us today, and the choices we make today will live on. But thank you, Chief Moore. I appreciate your perspective and the urgency of the work we have to do. So Case, welcome back to the stage as well. And just I want to follow up a little bit about some of the comments that you made, starting with you, Case. Tell us a little bit more about the initiative that the Softwood Lumber Board has underway to expand mass timber markets, that particular area of work.
Sure. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that question. The mass timber competition is obviously just the most recent example of our investment in growing this market. For over a decade now, the SLB funded programs have been working on multiple fronts to advance the use of wood and mass timber specifically, and much of that, as has been noted, in partnership with USDA. Going into 2022, a significant portion of our $18 million budget supports the promotion and adoption of innovative building systems such as mass timber. And that's from education to hands-on experiences to direct project support and in-depth research. we're continuing to share mass timber's advances. WoodWorks, a program as mentioned jointly funded by SLB and USDA, provides technical assistance to project teams, and their staff are currently supporting more than 120 mass timber projects around the country. Earlier this year, WoodWorks developed and launched the Mass Timber Construction Management Program, a program that educates general contractors on estimating, procuring, and managing mass timber projects. And we have a related mass timber installer training program that targets the crew leaders and installers who physically build these structures. Our Think Wood program engages design professionals and developers by promoting the commercial and environmental value of building with mass timber and providing them the resources to do so. Jointly developed with WoodWorks, Think Wood's Mass Timber Design Manual helps architects, engineers, and general contractors with building best practices. Think Wood just launched the Mass Timber Digest, a curation of research, demonstration projects, and innovative designs authored by leading AEC firms. And Think Wood Mobile Tour exhibit, also jointly funded with USDA, provides a hands-on experience that showcases mass timber's benefits. Speaking of that tour, it's currently in Washington, D.C., celebrating Forest Products Week, and if you're in the area, Chief Moore and Deputy Secretary Brana, I invite you to come down and check it out on the mall between 4th and 5th Streets. Another SLB-funded program, the American Wood Council, is currently supporting efforts in multiple states and jurisdictions to adopt the 2021 IBC code that allows the use of mass timber in buildings up to 18 stories. AWC is working to include provisions in the 24 code that would allow expanded use of 100% exposed timbers in certain building types. For 2022, we've increased our investment in AWC by 20% to enable them to engage more significantly in the important area of carbon accounting. Our education program directly reaches practitioners, students, and university faculty to make sure the current and future professionals are fully knowledgeable about wood design and construction. SLB launched the Wood Institute last year. It's an industry-wide e-learning platform featuring a catalog of over 140 courses from AWC, Think Wood, and WoodWorks. And we continue to partner with organizations with missions compatible to ours to offer programs such as the Timber in the City Student Design Competition, the Timber Education Prize, and providing further resources for higher education. In summary, the softwood lumber industry through the Softwood Lumber Board is heavily investing to support the expanded adoption of wood products such as mass timber in the U.S. to drive not only economic growth, but also create a more sustainable built environment. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, Katie, but it gives you perhaps some insight into where we're headed. There's definitely more to come.
Absolutely. It's a reminder, market development, it's multifaceted, all these dimensions. So that's what it takes. That's what it takes to create the built environment that we all want to see. And I love that training aspect, the education training, the job side of it. That's so critical. Chief Moore, we just talked about markets and all the work to develop these markets, but can you help us understand a bit more why markets are so important in helping the Forest Service and other landowners restore forests and keep forests as forests? What is that forest connection with markets?
Great. So thanks for that question, Katie. And when you really look at it, thousands of communities in the U.S. are at risk from catastrophic wildfires. And this is really due to the legacy of fuel buildup in our forests. It also comes from the effects of climate change. It comes from the spread of homes and communities into these fire-prone landscapes. It's the expansion of the wildland-urban interface. So really the solution is to restore forests to a more open conditions, where we have fewer trees. And we want to mimic what we had maybe from an ecological standpoint, so maybe 100 years ago. But in order to do that, that's going to take fuels and it's going to take forest health treatments at a scale that's equal to the wildfire risk which we're seeing right now. And that takes a lot of money. So one notion is that if we can sell at least some of the fuels that's removed, then we can afford to do more treatments at the right scale that we are seeing these fires take place on our landscape. We can also give more money, more people, wood product that they need for mass timber construction, energy, or other purposes that we might have. So, markets arrange for all of that, and especially markets for small diameter, low value wood, which we have an abundance of. And that's the type of material that we need to remove from out there to reduce the fuel loads that we're seeing on our landscape. And what I say, this is like ladder fuel, the fires start low and they work up into the crown. Well, we need to remove not only just some of the number of trees there, but also that small diameter, low value material that really has not a lot of market for right now. So I think markets being created around the type of material that we have available out there that we really need to remove would be a good thing. So by selling timber and other forest products, private forest landowners can afford to keep their land in forest rather than selling their land to developers. You know, markets of forest products of all kinds help keep America green. So that in a nutshell is why markets are so important. You know, we have the established traditional markets, and we'll keep that, but we also have the need for new markets to begin to emerge so that they can utilize the material that we have. I'll just give you one example, and then I'll shut up. But if I take what has happened in the Sierras in California, just looking at disease and insects, it affected over 150 million trees that we didn't really have a lot of markets for. And when I expand what I saw in the Sierras of California across the entire West, the market opportunities are huge. And so here again is just another plug for markets to continue to emerge based on the material that's available, not the material that we have traditionally had.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chief Moore. The urgency, the scale of the challenge, but the opportunity is also clear. So that's the time we have today for this discussion. Please, everyone, join me in thanking Case and Chief Moore, not only for your words today, but for the work that you are both championing and that you're doing together. So thank you both for being here today and for all the work that you're doing and that you will continue to do.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Katie.
Katie. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Case.
This has been an important start for framing and understanding what we are here to explore and learn together today. With that start, let us take a brief break. Take a moment for yourself, perhaps reflect on what you've heard so far. Think about who you're going to nominate for some of these new announcements and opportunities. And after the break, we will continue the experience when we turn to the private sector and hear about the leadership from Microsoft and Walmart and the role of partnerships in their impacts. Enjoy your break. See you later. See you in a little bit. Thank you.
Welcome to the forefront of change, where space and time are at a premium. To sustainably meet the demand of growing populations, we turn to wood, the material we've built with for generations that's rooted in nature. Now more than ever, we have the opportunity to use our time-tested profession to bring balance to the way we build, work, and even the way we live. Balance that can fuse functionality with cost and reduce a building's impact on the environment and the people around it. Timber is engineered into building materials capable of almost anything, giving you the ability to create structures and styles with infinite combinations. Wood brings style to substance. It's the bones of the building, and it can be what you see, a visual statement where the difference is the details. Texture and grain contribute to a natural look from a natural resource that draws people in with an intangible force. Wood can also have biophilic benefits that improve health and well-being, from reduced stress to improved productivity. Wood harnesses the power of the sun, stores carbon, and avoids greenhouse gas emissions. And just in case you were wondering, we aren't running out of trees. Forest and woodlands comprise roughly 1/3 of the U.S. and have remained stable even after decades of urban expansion. It's this sustainable growth that allows us to be innovative. Products like mass timber bring wood buildings to new heights, and building codes recognize the inherent properties of wood. Wood design can stand up to fire, seismic events, and high wind, allowing for endless possibilities. The science is simple. Wood structures are safe. They consistently deliver and exceed code requirements and lead to cost-effective projects with efficient timelines. And as we build more and grow closer together, we need to work together, to adapt, and to build for our future rooted in nature.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the break and are ready to continue the journey. We are now going to hear from two companies that are committed to improving their environmental performance and reducing the climate impacts of their actions and activities in the built environment. Our first panel features the leadership of Microsoft and is moderated by my friend and colleague, Brian Brashaw with the U.S. Forest Service. Brian, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. It's good to see everyone. I'm Brian Brashaw with the U.S. Forest Service, and I am the Assistant Director for our Wood Innovations Program, which leads our market development efforts that the Chief just talked about. The Forest Service is continuing to invest in mass timber because this connection helps support healthy, fire-resilient forest, creates rural jobs, and is a more sustainable building material. It's really my honor today to moderate a panel featuring Microsoft's engagement in mass timber. Our panel includes Gretchen O'Hara, who's the U.S. Vice President for AI and Sustainability Strategy, Sean James, who's the Director of Data Center Research for Microsoft, and Don Davies, who's the President of Magnuson Klemenczyk Associates, an engineering firm based in Seattle. Full bios for Gretchen, Sean, and Don are located in the bio section on the website. It's really our pleasure to have each of them join us today. We're going to start with Gretchen. Gretchen O'Hara is building the path for Microsoft's U.S. acceleration of its artificial intelligence, cloud, and sustainability initiatives with a goal of becoming carbon negative by 2030. Let's welcome Gretchen for her remarks.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Gretchen O'Hara, Vice President of AI and Sustainability Strategy at Microsoft, and I'm here to share Microsoft's position and progress on sustainability, as well as our efforts in leading sustainability in the built environment. At Microsoft, sustainability is not just something that we do from an operational standpoint, it's at the core of our business. We're committed to harnessing the power of technology to help everyone, everywhere, build a more sustainable future. And so I'm happy to share with you how we've done that ourselves. So let me start with our journey on sustainability. Microsoft started our sustainability journey over a decade ago, and we've landed important work ever since. We first started with our carbon emissions reduction goal back in 2009. But then in 2012, the company became carbon neutral long before most other major technology firms were even considering sustainability initiatives. In January of 2020, Microsoft launched the biggest commitment in the company's history to focus on the climate crisis. Microsoft's commitment to becoming carbon negative as a company by 2030, meaning that by the date it will remove from the environment more carbon than it emits. Going further, by 2050, Microsoft is also committed to remove from the environment all the carbon that the company has emitted directly or through electricity used since the company was founded in 1975. Now, we've built on that pledge with a series of industry-leading commitments to be water positive, zero waste company by 2030, and develop a new planetary computer to better monitor, model, and manage our world's ecosystems and protect more land than we use today. In addition to optimizing our own operations, Microsoft is investing in our collective future. We're funding and collaborating our technology and solution development. We're using our voice to influence policy. We're empowering our customers and our partners to reduce environmental footprint through our learnings, as well as through data science and artificial intelligence. And we're committed to initiatives to deliver climate equity and environmental justice to under-resourced communities around the world. Furthermore, targeting 2030 as a milestone for standardizing digitized sustainability data, at Microsoft, we're invested in building the world's leading platform for technology solutions to environmental challenges. So why is this important to Microsoft? Well, nature and the benefits that it provides are the foundation of our society, cultures, and the global economy. We depend on well-functioning ecosystems for clean air, water, food, medicine, energy, and building materials. But these very ecosystems are threatened or already in decline. And when a species dies off, the implication for the ecosystem can be catastrophic. So one critical barrier to protecting our ecosystem is our current understanding of them. That's why we have committed to doing what we can to protect our ecosystem and declared what we are going to do to really build, deploy, and accelerate a planetary computer through our AI for Earth program, a $50 million 5-year program that promotes the use of big data and technology to monitor, model, and manage the natural world. The planetary computer will aggregate environmental data from around the world and put it to work through the computing and machine learning to provide access to the world's critical environmental data sets. We're going to continuously onboard more data with our customers and our partners and build the tools that make it easier for scientists to ask global scale questions and then present those results and applications that support environmental monitoring, forecasting, planning, and attribution. We've also incorporated operational targets. We're taking responsibility for our ecosystem impact by committing to protect more land than we use by 2025. And we're making steady progress on these goals. We've onboarded 10 petabytes of environmental and Earth observation data to Azure that is now freely available for you by the conservation community. And we've also grown the AI for Earth community to over 700 AI for Earth grantees in more than 100 countries around the world. And we've established partnerships with the Nature Conservancy, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to fulfill our commitment to protect more land than we use by 2025. So as I mentioned, we depend on clean air, water, food, medicine, energy, and building materials. Maintaining nature for the benefit of current and future generations is one of humanity's greatest challenges. And that's why we're focused on deploying technology within our own campus sites to support this global effort. We're committed to contributing to the biodiversity of our environments. At our Silicon Valley campus, for example, we have restored native ecosystems by planting 600 trees on the site. In Munich, we combine technology and nature by using AI smart beehives on the rooftop terrace to protect and revive the ecosystems after decline in the bee population. We're also pursuing Salmon Safe certification, ensuring our building designs and construction practices will protect the Pacific Northwest salmon watersheds. Microsoft's global design standards are centered around protecting and preserving the biodiversity and health of the world's ecosystems. So when we do this, let's start with the EC3 carbon calculation tool. For context, embodied carbon is greenhouse gases that are emitted to build a structure. Think of it as the energy used to extract and process the raw materials that make concrete, and then the energy used to transport it to the construction sites. Embodied carbon has historically posed to us the same problems that affects building professionals everywhere. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that's why Microsoft helped create and launch the Embodied Carbon Calculator, EC3 tool. This tool runs on Azure and technology and operates as a searchable database and are pre-populated with data on more than 16,000 building materials. The data then is aggregated by the tool, helping architects, engineers, commercial real estate users create more informed plans to mitigate emissions. The EC3 tool can drive broad improvements across the entire building industry. In Mountain View, California, this commitment to environmental sustainability has driven the redesign of our Silicon Valley campus, which will be constructed mainly out of cross-laminated timber. Cross-laminated timber, also known as CLT, is the term for prefabricated, solid, engineered wood panels crafted by stacking several layers of kiln-dried lumber boards as an alternative directions and bonding them with structural adhesive, as durable as concrete and requiring significantly less energy to produce a comparably strong steel beam. CLT is providing an increasingly popular alternative to both. And because prefabricated materials arrive at a job site cut and ready to go, they go up faster, they leave less waste, and concrete and steel. And CLT does not bring significant amounts of embodied carbon to our sites because it's not as energy intensive to produce. And because as building product, it stores carbon dioxide just the way a tree would. So some 345,000 square feet of it, or 2,400 tons, will be used to build over half of the structural components of our Silicon Valley campus. And this puts Microsoft Silicon Valley on track to become the largest wood structure in the United States by volume of wood used. To ensure that it's sourced from responsibly managed forests, 100% of the wood we buy will be certified by the Forest Stewardship Council. In addition, there's other things that we've done to reduce carbon emissions, including ensuring our building designs allow for maximum flexibility as the workplace evolves. We're reusing trees and concrete where feasible on site. We're tracking carbon emissions and reducing embodied carbon at least 30% and remove what we don't reduce. Microsoft's experience and what we've learned about sustainability in the built environment can help you establish a more sustainable future, harnessing the power of technology. And so I'm happy to provide more information about anything that I've shared today. Thank you so much for having me talk with you, and really appreciate the time to come together.
That was awesome. Thank you very much, Gretchen. We're really excited to see the ongoing emphasis on mass timber and wood construction to support your sustainability goals. I'd now like to have Sean James and Don Davies join me for a panel discussion. Hi, Don.
Hey, Sean.
Looks like Sean's coming on. There we go. All our cameras are working. That's good news. So, and I certainly recognize your skyline behind you, Don. Thank you so much. So what I'd like to start with is really just a little bit of a conversation, but an opportunity to help understand where you both fit in the supply chain and for Microsoft. Sean is, as I mentioned, with Microsoft, and Don is associated. But Sean, could you introduce yourself and your role at Microsoft and really the connection and motivation for the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so I work on our data center team. So I'm Sean James, Director of Data Center Research. And inside of Microsoft, of course, we have the cloud. Well, the data centers is actually where the cloud is at. Those are the buildings that we put all of our servers, these buildings. What makes these buildings unique is that they have a lot of power in them, a lot of electrical power to power all those servers, and lots of cooling as well. Business is good. We have a really hard time keeping up with all the demand for building new data centers. So building materials has become a much higher priority for us, especially in the context of our sustainability goals that Gretchen talked about.
Thank you so much. You know, I when I read your bio, a couple of numbers jumped out at me. You know, the connection to 1 billion people that you know are and 20 million businesses that rely on that cloud and your data center infrastructure at Microsoft. So thanks a lot for sharing that. Don, would you introduce yourself and your firm's role in the Microsoft supply chain? And I know you've got a couple of slides that you want to share with us.
Sure, thanks, Brian. And here, let me share my screen because there's a couple images I want to put out here for everyone. Are you looking at unlimited demand? There we go. So MKA, we are structural and civil engineers. We're helping build the Microsoft campus in Redmond at the moment. One of the projects we're doing there is a mixed hybrid project with a lot of mass timber that's going into it. And so I've spent a lot of time in tracking the supply chain and the materials going to that building and where we go with that. I'm also one of the people that helped bring forth the EC3 tool that Gretchen had mentioned. So I've been spending a lot of time on this topic. In this picture here, this is actually a different MKA project, but I wanted to bring it up because it really highlights part of this conversation, which is we always hear about the competition of wood versus steel versus concrete, and it's really not the right debate. Even our best mass timber projects include a mix of materials like this one. There's timber in it, there's steel in it, and there's concrete. The best highly optimized buildings are actually a mix of all of these materials, using them for the job that they do best. And that's really where the trick and one of these challenges comes in when we talk about low carbon construction. How do we choose to mix these materials? When do we make the choice of where to put each? One other statistic I want to throw out there for everyone. It's estimated that we're going to double the world's building stock by 2060. That's equivalent to adding a new New York City every month for the next 4 decades. Now, we can debate if those are the right numbers or not of what's actually going to be built, but essentially that's an unlimited demand for limited resources, regardless of what the resource is. So we need to use our resources wisely in how we choose to build and what we choose to build with to meet our climate challenges. And we need data to inform those choices. That's what Gretchen was mentioning there. So how do we make the carbon advantageous choices? And it brings me to this next slide. Gretchen mentioned it right. You can't manage what you don't measure. And that's really at the key of what we're trying to do today in things like the embodied carbon and construction calculator. It's really this simple math. The design teams need to know the material quantities. We want compare that against a carbon footprint of the material reported in an environmental product declaration or an EPD, and that gives us a carbon estimate. The trick is in getting the details of the simple math accurate, and especially that middle part, that EPD, is where we're spending a lot of time right now. And that's a real challenge for timber. We want to be able, and we need to be able to compare timber to these other materials to help make our value choices. But there's a lot more going on in the forest than just carbon. But how we should track what happens upstream of the mill. Today, what makes it downstream to me, making our choices, is a carbon neutral, simplifying assumption that everything upstream of the mill is carbon neutral. That really isn't quite enough for what we're doing as next steps. Now, for Microsoft or other clients we're working with, when they go to the trouble to try to get it right and they want to build with mass timber, they're looking for the data that goes beyond that industry average. And as Gretchen and Sean had mentioned, there's some pretty powerful tools at their disposal to help bring that to the table, but still those only tell part of the story. We're looking for that tracking and transparency to come through the supply chain. And from what I see, the Forest Service is doing a pretty darn good job of collecting a lot of data, and certainly things with like Landsat satellites and what Microsoft has access to, there's a lot of comparative evaluation that can happen at the forest level. But currently, most of that information does not make its way downstream to our decision-making process. And that's one of the things we really need to challenge and fix to let us be credible with the claims we're making about mass timber. I'm confident mass timber is the lower carbon choice, but we really need to lean into that topic for what comes through the supply chain to let people make more informed choices.
Thanks a lot, Don. I really appreciate that. And I think, collectively, as we move forward, it's that comparison, right, between wood and other materials that we need to understand and evaluate, and how they all go together. And certainly all materials have a role in healthy buildings, in high performing buildings as we move forward. So I'm going to kind of rotate back and forth now with just really more conversational questions. And Sean, as we were preparing for this, you're director of data center research, actually. So there's quite a bit of activity that you're going on there. Can you share with us some of the research that is informing and driving the carbon solutions that Microsoft is exploring?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, we want to get our data centers off of carbon intensive energy and onto renewable energy. And so there's a lot of work being done there. But one of the pieces of decarbonizing that's been not as sort of popular, not as obvious, is the embodied carbon. And so, when we look at our operations, we've got a really good plan to get off of fossil fuels and get to carbon-free energy, but the embodied carbon piece is still yet to be solved. So, typically when we build data centers, these type of facilities are built with very high standards of care, very industrial, robust type materials. So when we hire our architects and engineers and our contractors, like, they're putting in the most robust stuff. So it's concrete, it's steel, it's, not just to run a circuit from here to there, but put it in, rigid conduit, things of that nature. So the very first thing we needed to do is figure out, well, where's the best opportunities to reduce embodied carbon? The second thing is what are our options? And so the EC3 tool has been very, very helpful. We're using that right now in our data centers. When we go to build a new data center, first thing we try to do is, what materials are available in that geographic region that are the lowest embodied carbon? Okay, so that's a great start. But the second start is, what are the pieces inside the data centers that we can actually innovate out the embodied carbon? So we hired ZGF to actually, in the Carbon Leadership Forum, we said, look, just go out there, talk to every university, talk to every startup. I want a full accounting on every building material that's currently being researched that could help us eliminate embodied carbon. What they came back with was a lot of opportunities to use building materials to actually go to carbon negative, We could actually build data centers with things like CLT, but some other materials that are still in the laboratory that look very interesting as well. There's structurally insulated panels that are being made out of mycelium. There's concrete blocks that are bonded with algae grown blocks. So it's a really good opportunity. In our industry, we're very risk adverse. So the very first thing that we need to do is sort of prove to ourselves that these materials can be just as applicable in a data center. Now, what's different about a data center than like an office building or apartments? It's that cooling that I was talking about. Okay, so data centers, we use outside air to cool the servers, and then we use evaporative cooling to bring the temperature down. Now, what that does is it creates very humid environments, and the humidity swings a lot. So the very first thing we need to do is just make sure that all these different materials we're looking at, mass timber, CLT, algae-grown bricks, whatever else the scientists think of, we're not going to have any sort of unique defects or unique issues with the data center later. Then we can actually start deploying these in our data centers because we're, like I said, we're building a lot of data centers. But that's just the first phase. The second phase is to tell the world and to be like, hey, look, we're willing to use these carbon negative materials in a data center. What's stopping you from using those in every other building type that's out there? So it's a really good opportunity for us to use our own data centers to be carbon negative and to also be a leader for the world to say, hey, these materials are ready for prime time. There's no reason why anybody else can't use these.
Awesome. And I think that's one of the things, as you heard Dr. Bernard mention today, is where else can we use wood? Where else can we use it in places where it maybe hasn't typically shown up? And that's, some of the thinking behind the grant programs that we announced today ourselves and in partnership with the Softwood Lumber Board. So Don, Sean, I've got a couple more for you, but I'm gonna jump over to Don here. And Don, Chief Moore has really lived this. He was the regional forester in California, and certainly very exposed to things like fire and some of the other challenges that are really facing us. But he also mentioned how America is blessed with many different kinds of forests, and I know you gentlemen are based in the Pacific Northwest, but the diversity of forests across the country is really amazing, and we do have, I believe, very confident that we have good sustainable forest management practices across the country. Whether it be like the Forest Service, where we're guided by federal law and policy, or states, third-party certification that was mentioned previously, or really best management practices. There's a variety of ways, I think, to do that. So I guess the question, I've got two parts for you, Don, is the first part is, as we see more and more wood construction in commercial buildings, what opportunity does mass timber have to support this carbon management? Forestry, it's really the supply chain. It's forestry, it's harvesting, production, and then long-term storage. And we'll come back to kind of procurement language separately. But really, what do you see as this connection, between the supply chain in terms of carbon management?
So the first thing that I jump on that is when we talk about mass timber. One of the big pushes, why do people want to see mass timber buildings? It's beautiful to look at for sure, but they want to go there because they perceive it and they believe it's a lower carbon alternative. And I believe it is. But we get ourselves in this quandary that if it's the lower carbon alternative, are we providing the data to let us verify that, put that information out there? And that's one of the first things we need to spend a little bit more time on, is being able, how we talk about the data, how the data makes its way from the forest to decision makers at the end of the day in the buildings. And it's so we can be credible, so we can tell the story of why timber is the right choice, because our owners like Microsoft are looking for data that comes into their decision-making process. A big part of that is actually just providing uncertainty. So, rarely is it a single number. There's usually some uncertainty within the data. And when we can show we're outside of the whisker bars of that uncertainty, it's really easy to make the arguments in the statement about we're carbon neutral or carbon negative. There are a lot of other materials, as Sean had mentioned, starting to move towards carbon neutral, trying to become more carbon negative. I think they have a long ways to go before they meet where timber actually is at, but that's a story we want to be able to tell. But I think we need that better disclosure of the data making its way through the supply chain to be able to do that. It's kind of interesting. I see steel and concrete both coming forward with carbon neutral material offerings. At the underpinning of their carbon neutral offering is a buying of forest carbon offsets in order to overcome the net difference on the material at the end of the day. So in some ways, this kind of comes full circle. And I think carbon offsets becomes part of that conversation. A last thing I want to mention, though, also is the problems that we're choosing to solve. Timber material, I'll use the term fiber optimized design. We just need to think a lot about how we're using the material and where we're using it in the most optimized solutions. And that also, I think, is where the carbon storage comes in. Use the materials wisely in ways that they will be very durable and last for long terms, but also in a very optimized way.
So can you tell us, just a follow-up, Don? I know you were part of really the early development of EC3 as a calculator, but can you speak more generally in terms of carbon accounting and some of the kinds of things that we, when I look at a building, and I had an incredible opportunity to tour the University of Idaho's new basketball arena 2 weeks ago, and who would have thought, a mass timber basketball arena. And, I went into that building and everybody that goes into it is going to see different things. But when you think about forestry and when you think about seeing this material and the carbon, both the embodied carbon and the stored carbon, how do you think about that? As we move forward, that connection, because a lot of people, when they go to the woods, they don't think about carbon. When they go into a new arena or a new building, they don't really think about carbon. They think about the beauty of it. But maybe you can just share a little bit more about that connection to you when you think about carbon and that importance is both in the embodied side and also on the storage end.
So, the whole reason we created EC3 and we jumped into it in the first place was I wanted to be able to tell the embodied carbon story with credibility. I wanted to be able to quantify what we are doing in our building choices, when we're making smart choices or not. And when we are making a smart choice, to be able to celebrate that. And so that was really the motivation behind doing this. One of the biggest things that I learned from that, though, is really there's a huge uncertainty in the data. And we need to bring forth that uncertainty in variation to explain when we're making better choices. We all, when I think about carbon, I think about climate change. I think about the hurricanes and the tornadoes and the forest fires that we're facing. And if what we are building, are we part of the solution or part of a problem in that? And making sure we're doing the right things to ensure we're part of the solution on that. To me, that's really the driver for it. And that's really the driver through all of these decision-making processes.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sean, back to you. You talked a little bit about about data centers and mass timber and that connection. What really has to happen, for mass timber to be to come full circle in terms of really becoming not more than just a demonstration material for a data center, but a material that is one of those options that can be selected based on where you are in the country or where the right decisions come through. What else has to happen there?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I'll be honest with you. This looks like an easy one. So a lot of the stuff that I research, it's pretty exotic or pretty high risk. So far, we've looked at this and it's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of history, of course, with building with wood and with timber. It's really about the supply chain. So I'm just going to echo what Don said. It's really about the supply chain. So think about this. When I started with Microsoft 21 years ago, we didn't build any data centers. We built our first one in 2006. We didn't build another one a year later. And these were big deals. Like we would spend a lot of time preparing for these new data center projects to make sure that they're ready to go. as the demand for cloud services has ramped over the last 15 years, since our first data center, the scale at which we grow has really exploded. So like I said, we would start one data center every year and a half. We got to a point where we were starting one data center a month. Today, we're at a point, we're starting like a data center like every week. So at this point, we think about data center construction as if like we're a factory. So supply chain can kill us. So what we need to understand with mass timber is its availability, not just in the US, but all over the world. So, when we looked at our first project, our first sort of demonstration project, this was in the East Coast. One of the first red flags that we saw is, hey, the availability of this looks rough, and then the cost as well. We saw that maybe there was some cases where the cost of timber could be lower if you brought it from overseas. So that doesn't make any sense, and we're not really excited about using material that's sort of being shipped across the U.S. anyway, or sorry, across the ocean anyway. The other thing is our workforce ready for it? So there was an example of an industry that went from building things out of traditional industrial materials, concrete and steel, and this one particular project went to wood. This was a very large stadium in Illinois. The stadium ended up collapsing during construction. Who were building it? The people building it were iron workers that were used to putting together steel things, right? And wood things act and behave a little bit differently. So that's another thing, is to make sure wherever we go in the world, we have the supply chain. We also have the people that know how to put together very, robust, large industrial structures with wood. Other than that, I think this is a good winner.
Awesome. And I think, we have been investing in the kinds of things that you're just asking about. The Forest Service has invested over $35 or $40 million to support really this supply chain since 2014. And we're excited. We know it's emerging. When we started in 2014, we had a couple of buildings and really no U.S. manufacturers. And now we have, from boutique to large, maybe 12 plants. And I think that connection is going to continue to extend. And the construction end of it, we've partnered with Woodworks, who's helping run the technology platform today. You'll hear a little bit later from Jennifer Cover. How do we construct this? How do we build that? But I think the great part is once a construction team has been involved, they understand and are looking forward to doing the next, right? It becomes, they get their legs under them, so to speak. And I had an opportunity last week to tour the Ascent project in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the first couple floors, as they were getting going, they got their legs under them, and things are really rolling now. Don, back to you. I'm going to give you a little more here. We talked about the carbon part of it, but I think one of the things that you in one of your slides was this tracking and transparency. And this, again, it comes to these various paths to forestry that we have in the country: private ownership, public ownership, tribal ownership, many different options as we go forward. So really, where do you see language, especially in maybe in the corporate world, specifications and procurement language to support these building choices? What do you vision happening and coming forward?
So, that was really at the heart of why we helped create the EC3 tool. We wanted to help create more informed buyers so that when they're making purchasing choices, they know what they're buying and they understand what they're buying in their material procurement choices. And it really wasn't so much steel versus concrete versus wood. It's like, when you buy concrete, who's got the best concrete? When you buy timber, who's got the best timber? It creates differentiation between the materials. And what we see is, echoing a little bit of what Sean said, owners are always going to be cost driven. But when it's a commodity material, or if it's a commodity element, once a decision has been made, it's going to be mass timber or it's steel or for a certain part of a project. If cost is similar, but there's carbon variation between the choices, it becomes the differentiator between who gets the project. That's really the key behind the EC3 tool, is creating that competition with an ask at the point of procurement, help create differentiation, to reward those that are doing it better. And that's not just timber, that goes for any material. But that is what we are trying to do in specification and procurement language for all the materials. So when we talk about timber, what is missing for us to really be able to do that is there needs to be better disclosure and understanding of the supply chain. Where does the material come from? Can we track it, and can we tell that story? We're really trying to get out of a bipolar conversation of, oh, it's FSC or not. There's as you've noted, Brian, there's many other ways of really good things that are happening at the forest level that may not have a certain certification. We want to be able to bring those stories forward, but what's happening, I see in specifications right now, is we want to create a competition to allow there to be an informed purchasing choice, competition between the same material. We want to put some disclosure and some sort of minimum guardrails on those questions. It may or may not be FSC, but some sort of guardrails that says the wood we're asking for is it's carbon smart. We're doing something that's better for the environment. We're not making it worse. I don't necessarily know for sure what that right language is. That's something we're actually working on actively right now, but trying to help generate what that should be. And ideally, there needs to be some data to the numbers that allows for a quantitative decision, not just a qualitative decision. So that's really what's coming forth in the specs and the procurement language from the suppliers or the developers we're working with. They want a competition, they want disclosure, and they want choice to be able to reward those that are doing it better.
Thanks for sharing that. I think, we have this opportunity here in front of us to make wood a preferred part of the solution. And I think you kind of touched on it. We have to be cautious about my forestry is better than your forestry. My wood is better than your wood, and find ways that we can really support that connection to healthy forests. Because as the chief indicated, there's certainly a lot of challenges with wildfire that we're facing, and those wildfires aren't limited to you all in the Pacific Northwest. We've had the worst fire year here in Minnesota that we've had in a long time, and other parts of the country. So thank you for those kinds of comments. So I've got kind of two wrap-up questions that Sean, we'll go back to you. We heard Gretchen talk, and the amount of construction that's taking place broadly across Microsoft. But what does the future for mass timber look like at Microsoft? And I guess the follow-up I would have is, tell me more about the partnerships that really have to happen, that it's not just a very linear line, but there's quite a bit of partnerships that really take place to get projects to completion.
Yeah, good question. So yeah, partnerships are key. When we commissioned the Carbon Leadership Forum to, like I said, go out there and give us a full catalog of all the new materials, I was surprised to see timber on there. Now I'm not sophisticated in building of buildings with wood and things like. All I know is growing up in the Northwest, every time as a kid when I'm driving out with my family to the shore, we'd pass all of those clear-cut forests. My parents would say, "That's just terrible. That's a shit." So a lot of us grew up just knowing that, look, you can't just clear-cut forests, and we need to figure out something better. So at Microsoft, I think there's a lot of re-education that, no, actually there's different types of forests. This is one of the things that I learned that was fascinating, is not every forest is the same. Like some forests are ideally sort of engineered for, growing of timber and clearing that timber and then regrowing the timber. And then other forests, you leave those alone. Those are an important part of the habitat. So that was an important nuance for me to learn, and the rest of Microsoft, our leadership needs to understand as well. And then, like I said, we have some more testing to do. How does this material work and the uniquenesses of a data center? But like I said earlier, I think it's a very, very promising, innovation to build these data centers out of wood.
And as a student who lived out in the Northwest, a lot of times some of those, you'd be amazed if you get on the ground and see how many trees are actually there as part of regeneration and replanting that have taken place. So those are hard things to see from the distance, but I think I appreciate the fact that you're taking the time to understand the nuances and the connection to forestry and what that brings it forward.
Well, that's a good point. And like I said, young Sean would drive past these clear-cut forests, but now adult Sean, I'm driving my kids out there, and there's giant forests. It's all regrown, and I'm like, hey guys, and I remember there would be signs like this forest was planted in 1984, but there was nothing there. It was like these little shoots. Now there's a whole forest back, so it's absolutely renewable, and I've got to see that with my own eyes. And now I'm showing my kids, hey, when I was young, that was nothing but stumps. And look at this, there's a whole forest that's back.
I think that's a big key is seeing that opportunity to replant, regrow, and reharvest again for generations. Don, we're talking a little bit about the future. What does the future of mass timber look like to you? What kinds of things is your firm involved in, both with Microsoft and others? But what does that future of mass timber look like for you?
To me, this is fascinating because it's, as you said, it's a regenerative bio-based material. But to me, the future of mass timber, it's really just a couple of terms. It's fiber optimized design, it's engineered wood products, and it's hybrid solutions. An important point here is buildings are over 50% of a building is a floor system, whether it's a low rise or a high rise building. And we do a lot of both. We build more floor than anything else. And using the sports analogy, I really think the timber industry, in mass timber, we need to start playing infield ball and going for the singles and the doubles and the triples and stop trying to hit a home run on every single project. It will greatly accelerate adoption of the material if we use the material where it's best suited and stop trying to force it in to be the solution that does everything. The simple one, like I said, a floor system, you look at it, it's beautiful. It's over 50%, if not up to 70% of the total volume of material that goes into a building. Columns, it's less than 10%. It is really, really difficult to try to use timber in a high-rise building, timber columns. But it's a really simple solution and easy thing to solve with a piece of steel or a piece of non-combustible concrete in that application. I think we need to play more of the infield ball, use the material, solve the problems where the material is really best suited, and not try to be going for the home runs on everything. And I think we will speed the acceleration of its use just by doing that. And again, when we talk about engineered wood products, fiber orientation, I think about like a glulam beam. We already sort by species and grade of lumber and put these materials together. Let's start using more different species of materials that go into those outer fibers. I've even seen people experimenting with, let's put a layer of carbon fiber on the bottom of a glulam beam, and what does that do? More fiber-oriented design using, wood is, there's a 10-to-1 ratio. If I load wood in the direction of the grain, flaw-free Douglas fir is over 8,000 PSI. That's stronger than the concrete under my feet. I turn it 90 degrees though, and I crush the cells, is less than 10% of that number. So fiber orientation, hybrid solutions, I think is where we're headed.
Well, that's great. I appreciate that. And those are the kinds of things that we're trying to invest in. The Forest Service is one of the largest, if not, I think it's the largest research organization in the world. That includes forestry, but it also includes our Forest Products Laboratory, which is in Madison, Wisconsin. And they have certainly been a lead all the way back to all the things that we take for granted right now. That has really been a huge part of their history all the way back into the 30s and 40s. We have more forests now than we had 50 years ago, and I think that's an important part of this. And we've tried to make those investments, as you both indicated. Forestry is important, and what we're trying to do is find opportunity to use other species that are lesser used, that need markets, and that are still part of these challenges that are out there. So those are some of the things that in our Wood Innovation Grant Program we funded last year. Opportunity to look at additional species in the Pacific Northwest. How can we creatively use small and medium-sized trees? How can we use hardwoods? Certainly we've been talking about softwoods here, but to me the future of mass timber includes additional species, and includes hardwoods in other parts of the country, and it really creates this opportunity going forward. Don, did you want to have any comments? Or really, you are one part of this supply chain. Tell us a little bit about the partnerships that you've developed and how important that is in bringing projects from a development, an owner, in this case Microsoft, to the construction and all of the things that have to take place in there to get to success.
So, we're structural engineers. So, there's two parts that come with that. One is we're who gets pulled in when there's math to be done a lot of times, and we're asked to be credible and accountable with it and held to the numbers that we put forth. So that's part of where I've jumped into this process, but it's been a fascinating journey to understand the supply chain and frankly start crossing barriers that hadn't been crossed before. It's amazing to me how much information is out there, say from the Forest Service or other places, that simply doesn't make its way through the supply chain. And when we've reached across that barrier and started asking questions like, oh yeah, we have all that data, it's right here, but no one's ever asked us for it. Oh, we haven't been asked to use that data in that way. Oh, that's what you're trying to do. They're two different languages. And it's what's been fascinating is when someone like Microsoft comes to the table and puts out the big goal, the big, hairy, audacious goal that we're going to try to do, sets the standard and says, we value this, we care about it, we're going to lean in to try to do it. And oh, by the way, we're writing the check that's going to try to make it happen. How do we make that happen? It totally opens the doors all the way through the supply chain. The most successful projects are the ones where we actually bring everyone to the table early in the process. We did that on the Microsoft project, where we had from the forester to the mill, to the lumber supplier, to the owner, to the forest regulator, to the engineer and the architect. We got everyone into the room a year before we were ever even done with the building to talk about, okay, how do we actually do this and try to do it right? And so you mentioned the partnerships, creating that understanding to even know the communication channel, how the other person thinks and talks about, or what data they have available, and then how we can use that data. It's fascinating to where that brings us forward. Ultimately, it's about rewarding best practices, rewarding those that are doing it better, to incentivize growth, to do more of that part of it. And that is, I think, what's exciting in these partnerships right now is it allows us to bring more mass timber, to tell the story well. As Sean said, you like to tell the story of where the timber came from on your building, because it's tactile, people can touch it. And that comes from the partnerships and knowing what happens there through that entire line.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. You both have laid out some challenges, but the opportunities are really boundless. And I think that as we continue to participate in today's event, we're going to hear from another corporation, Walmart, that's moving in this direction. But there's so many others, and there's a lot of resources out there. And thank you for highlighting the importance of forestry, the importance of doing forestry right, which I think we do a good job in the U.S. But really, what else can we do? How can we optimize? How can we communicate? How can we partner? So with great appreciation, thank you both, Don and Sean and Gretchen, for participating today in our panel. We look forward to continuing to work together in the future.
Talk to you later.
All right. Well, I get an incredible honor here, and I think maybe we're just a minute ahead, but I'd like to introduce our next panel with Walmart, and especially their moderator, Peter McKeith. Peter has been a longtime partner for the U.S. Forest Service. He is the dean at the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design at the University of Arkansas. Peter's been a force in mass timber in Arkansas, leading and championing projects on campus, but really also championing the connection to state forests. And how does that work? And all of a sudden, there's this connection with Walmart and their enthusiasm and choice of selecting wood as part of their future construction. So with that, it's really my opportunity and honor to introduce Peter McKeith. Peter, thank you for your partnership and welcome.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's a pleasure to be partnered with you in this. I have here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, the upper reaches of the Ouachita National Forest, I am speaking at least briefly against the backdrop of our 12:30 horn out in the distance, but I am very pleased to be joining this entire discussion this afternoon. I'm joined with three stellar partners here in the state of Arkansas to really engage a conversation about Walmart's journey towards mass timber, and really towards what has been called their regenerative company. I'm joined, if I could have our panelists join me, I'm joined first by Joe Albright, Senior Director of Corporate Real Estate at Walmart. Also by Hardy Wenzel, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Structurlam of Canada, but now also Structurlam of Conway, Arkansas. And then thirdly, by Paul Fast, who is known not just nationwide or continent-wide, but worldwide as an engineer and certainly the founder of Fast & Epp, who is working together with Walmart on their headquarters in Bentonville, just 30 miles north of where I am sitting. I'll begin with some overview as to why we are focused on Arkansas today. Joe, if I could have our first slide to move us through an introduction. In 2015, the Fay Jones School, together with others across the state, began to ask a very simple question. What does it mean to live and work in a state that is almost 60% covered in forest? Now, we're not alone in asking this question in our states. My colleagues in South Carolina, my colleagues in Oregon are certainly asking the same question across the board. But we've had success, if I could have the next slide. We've had success in this effort on multiple levels, in large part due to a productive ecology of partnerships across the state, in state governance, in state industries, forest and timber and wood product industries, state business enterprises, nonprofit organizations, and certainly here in the university. This is a theme that we'll come back to repeatedly in our conversation, one that you've already heard sounded in the earlier discussion with Microsoft. Our work as a school began with public education, as you can see, in a number of conferences and symposia, engaging a number of partners, as I've said, from the very beginning. Next slide. It's also so that we have been able to work on campus here at the University of Arkansas in something of a greenhouse. We've been able to bring projects forward utilizing mass timber, glue laminated frames, cross-laminated timber panel envelopes, in a range of projects, and not only here on campus, but elsewhere in the region. Next slide. We've also, most importantly, I would say, been able to demonstrate that the university can function as something of a research and development center for the forest, timber, and wood product industries in the state, the region, and the nation. But even more specifically, with pertinence to Walmart's own efforts, we've been able to be something of a proof of concept demonstrator, most recently in the design and construction of the Adohi Residence Halls, 200,000 square feet, 700 beds, finished 2 years ago, really enabling Walmart to see coming into being an effective, efficient system of construction that I think ultimately, as Joe might admit, was persuasive to their own efforts. Now, with that as a backdrop, it's important to note that as Walmart announced, as it did in 2020, that it was shifting towards a declaration beyond sustainability and shifting, in fact, a company-wide identity towards a regenerative company, that the declaration and announcement of its new headquarters was an important factor in catalyzing everything that we've been doing across the state. And with that, I'd like to begin our conversation with a few questions first to Joe Albright. Joe, could you describe the Walmart journey towards mass timber investment in Walmart's new headquarters, and perhaps give us a sense of the ambitions of that project and characterize it architecturally speaking?
Certainly, Peter. And as you know, and as you stated, sustainability was something we recognized and began our journey with back in 2005. And as recently as last year, Doug's remarks to take us to a regenerative company have continued to underline not only our aspirations to do our part as a company and as an influencer, as many of the products and materials that we procure, but just how we provide a leadership situation for that. As you would expect, we have some pretty big goals, and I was very pleased to see how closely ours mirror Microsoft's, and that most large companies are recognizing the differences we need to make for the environment and for nature, for the globe. The discussion around mass timber, Peter, as you will recall, was very natural. We began thinking about a new home office over 350 acres. We had a landscape architect in that was helping us think about what kind of campus it would be. We began visiting with you and many of the other leaders in mass timber, and kind of were sitting here with a piece of land that was maybe only 15% permeable. Thought what it could have been 500 years ago, and then maybe what it could be as we redevelop campus. Of course, how we do that sustainably, we're at the headwaters of 3 watersheds. How the control of this water, the quality, all of that can really be taken into account in terms of making meaningful difference in what our community will be. So when we did that, mass timber was very natural. The projects that were going on at the University of Arkansas were a laboratory for us to really get people together, talk, learn, understand, and educate ourselves about what the potential was. As Sean and Don mentioned earlier, the sourcing of that was a little bit of a challenge because most of these products were either made in Europe or in Canada. A new mill was going up in Alabama at the time, but we were concerned with sourcing and interruptions of the supply chain even back in 2018. And really, this was a series of questions. And what is the opportunity? What could we do if we chose to have all mass timber buildings around campus? We'll have 12 office buildings that would comprise 2.4 million square feet. So it'll be more of a college campus setting, but at the same time, all of the main structural elements will be of wood. And Don's quotes on the percentages are right on in terms of how much is CLT versus the Glulam members. I think really recognizing this opportunity for what it could mean, not only for Walmart, but for the state and one of our largest natural resources, was something we felt like it was a unique opportunity that could not be passed up. So we were really confident in moving ahead. I think we'll hear for a little bit more from Paul, but the fact that we had everyone in the room early, from the twinkle in our eye design stage with manufacturing and Hardy, with the architects, we sort of had to work through it. When you don't have a plant or even a site for a plant, it's hard to make people believe, but you still continue to walk on through those doors and live with ambiguity a little bit, knowing what the goal is at the end. So I think mass timber was really simple for us to think that these trees that can be grown 300 miles from campus, processed in Conway, 200 miles from campus, and then, having a minimal ship to distance at the end is such a tremendous opportunity. I believe our project will embody over 91,000 metric tons of carbon. That would equal about 20,000 cars off of the road for 1 year, or enough, the equivalent of maybe 10,000 homes for power. So a meaningful impact. We're as thoughtful about what flows through the stores on the sustainability side, but knowing the visibility that we'll have because of all of our guests and suppliers visiting, we thought mass timber was something that could really be a natural expression of the company's values and how we want to make a difference in providing a leadership role for a demonstration of this material.
Well, one thing which we spent a lot of time talking about, Joe, over the years as the project has developed, has been sourcing. And the importance of sourcing has been noted before in the earlier presentation, and of course is now very much at issue with the Softwood Lumber Board efforts, Woodworks efforts, U.S. Forest Service efforts. Walmart has developed its own approach to sourcing, as the project has developed. And I wonder if you could take us through the shift, the evolution, let's say, in Walmart's emphasis on mass timber from simply seeking supply and sourcing to actually direct investment in an Arkansas-located CLT manufacturing facility.
I think it really goes back down to the discussion around relationships and understanding the unique opportunity, because at the same time we were in this process, Hardie was under a transition of their own, and meeting people with common interests, the values that both companies share from a corporate sustainability standpoint, corporate social responsibility, as well as just the basic beliefs of each company. So their goals were very aligned with what ours were. And I think many times Hardie and I have had a discussion about this is almost really more of a tech company that does manufacturing versus a manufacturing company. And that's really evidenced by the engagement of Paul and our other design team members really being thoughtfully engaged from the outset. And I think how we approach that has really kind of been backed up by what our belief in the future of this opportunity is, and how well we're seeing it resonating with different developers, different owners, and for sure the design community embracing this new method of construction.
Well, it's a remarkable evolution, and certainly there's much to look forward to as the headquarters project is now breaking ground and is beginning to take shape. I'd like to shift, if I could, to Hardie Wensel, who we've introduced earlier, and Joe, you've referred to, because this is a key factor in this overall growth of Arkansas, and of course in the growth of the project. Hardie, Joe's already talked about Walmart's approach, in a sense, to you and to Structurlam, but could you in turn describe Structurlam's journey towards a production facility in the United States and to Arkansas in particular? I think there will be of what we're trying to do here, of course, is to indicate to those listening in just how important these relationships are and these investments are in bringing forward regionally centered production facilities. So again, what's been Structurlam's journey into the U.S. and into Arkansas? You need to unmute, Hardie.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. The journey of Structurlam really began back in when the company was founded in 1962. And the company has always had a market in the U.S. for its original heavy timber products, which then moved to mass timber, including the CLT production in 2011 as one of the first manufacturers in North America to make CLT and the glued laminated timbers. Since 2011, you can see how this woodwork slide has really mushroomed in terms of mass timber projects in design as well as in construction. And Structurlam, right up there in the Pacific Northwest, just over the US border. We have our facilities here in Penticton, British Columbia. And my aspiration when I joined the company in 2018, and just before I met Joe and others from Walmart, was to expand our company with US manufacturing capacity. And my industry experience told me very early on that with my time with Weyerhaeuser, that Arkansas would be an ideal location. And as we can see here on the map, the proximity to Texas, obviously the proximity to the markets east of Conway, and also north and into the northeast markets. And these are all markets that are really making inroads with mass timber, not only to the marketing efforts of what we do, but also a lot of this marketing is being done by groups like Woodworks and Softwood Lumber Board. So it's really been a very collaborative effort. Specific to Arkansas, The wood fiber basket in Arkansas in terms of lumber production is very ideal. There's over 2.7 billion board feet of lumber production of softwood lumber that we need to manufacture mass timber. Conway is ideally located, just being on the outskirts of Little Rock. And as Joe said, you know, we're a 200-mile distance to Bentonville for our deliveries. But if you look beyond the Walmart project, in a 500-mile radius of central Arkansas, you've got 72 million people in the U.S. population in a number of the major cities that we can access as well. So it's a real complementary strategic move for Structurlam to be in Arkansas. And we're very much excited about getting our first product moving out of the door and being shipped up to Bentonville as well.
Again, I think there's potentially something of a template, but certainly there was the opportunity was presented, and here in the state, of course, we're very excited by your ability to enter in. What do you see as the future more generally for mass timber production? This has come up before in the earlier conversation, the need to have now multiple sources, multiple manufacturing locations. What do you see as that future when you look out for further business opportunity?
Yeah, so it's, you know, the vision of the company is to ignite a mass timber revolution to transform commercial building. And much of this is driven by our sustainability values at Structurlam, and the amount of climate change improvement work that needs to be done really needs to be driven through building construction in the commercial sector. We all know the impact of what concrete steel has on our environment. The mass timber solution is renewable, it stores carbon, and it makes, you know, beautiful places for people to live, work, and play. So the future, if we could just go to the next slide, please. Yeah, is really depicted here on this product life cycle curve. And this is actually taken from a book called Crossing the Chasm that was written in the early 1990s by Jeffrey Moore. And I find this to be very, very fitting for exactly what we're going through with the expansion of mass timber. And so, you know, back in the early days in 2012, 2013, 14, 15, and Paul Fast can attest to this as well, because he's been one of the true technology enthusiasts, I would say, in helping get us to crossing the chasm. And this chasm is really where you move from being an innovative type of new product, and then you begin to move into the areas where early adoption occurs, and you start moving through the product life cycle. And the time frame of this is obviously left up to the product itself, but I can attest that this will be a very, very long-term building solution for us to use for many years. And the chasm that we have to cross has to be done with a very sustainable commercial downstream delivery vehicle. So what does that all mean? It means unconstrained capacity. And we've seen that manifest itself over the last 5 years here in North America, where an abundance of new manufacturing capacity has come online. And there's more to follow. Obviously, our Conway plant will be the most state-of-the-art plant in North America, supplied by an abundant wood basket that I've already mentioned. But I really believe that as product adoption takes place in the specifying community amongst architects and engineers, building owners are looking at using mass timber more and more. And you have to ask why that is. And a lot of that is driven by the consumerism that is happening, and with the additional and increased awareness by consumers of what their sustainability footprint is. And that is also driving how they choose to live, where they choose to live, what kind of buildings they choose to live in, and also where they work. So I believe we've crossed the chasm, A big indicator of that is the fact that we are now, mass timber is codified in the International Building Code in the US, and we're able to make mass timber buildings by code up to 18 stories. There's refinements being made as we move forward. So this is one clear example that we've crossed the chasm and we're moving into this early adopter stage of the product life cycle.
That's certainly something we're seeing across the country altogether. I'd like to bring Paul Fast into our conversation now, introducing Paul earlier as the founder of FastNet. But Paul, your work has literally been across North America and very much even across the world. What's distinctive about the emergence of this mass timber economy in the Southeast that Structurlam is now participating in, Walmart is now leveraging? How are you finding the work that you're doing and gaining from it? You're on mute as well.
There you go. Yeah, thank you, Peter, for asking that question, and happy to share a few thoughts about firstly Walmart, and then I'd like to expand a little bit beyond, sort of be a bit of a state of a union from a structural engineering perspective on what's happening in North America, and just talk about some of those chasms that we've had to cross, and that some of the hurdles that still remain in order to see mass timber become mainstream. Firstly, a couple of thoughts on the Walmart project. I mean, what an opportunity this has been. Anytime you have an opportunity to design like 2.4 million square feet of mass timber commercial space, this is a dream for a structural engineer. And yet it was a big challenge because, Walmart's credo, as many of you may know, is EDLC and EDLP, everyday low cost and everyday low price. And we knew this had to be a low cost solution. And of course, it's like when you're designing a tall tower, like 50, 60, 70 stories, that one floor plate, you put all your effort into designing that floor plate as efficiently as possible with as little rebar as possible so that you can harvest as much saving as possible. And so in this case, we had an opportunity to really put a lot of time into finding the most efficient, functionally efficient floor layout together with the architects and the client, and marry that with a low cost solution. And in the end, we ended up with a 30-foot by 30-foot grid and it's 3-ply CLT supported by timber purlins and timber girders, and to have Structurlam right at the outset too, and be able to tap into what their product offering would be was just a really key part of the puzzle in getting to the final solution. The other thing that was afforded us, we were able to build a mock-up, and we were able to test not only the grid layout that we're proposing, but also 7 different connector types. Connections are a key part of efficient mass timber design. And being able to test 7 of these different connectors and then pick the most optimal one. These are all little things that just advance the cause of mass timber. So that's been super. And just the fact that a new plant was being started up here too, and like I mentioned, having a supplier there at the outset was a real plus. There you see the mock-up, and so when such a large project is realized, it's not only a great step forward for that project, but just for mass timber in general. I mean, when an industry leader like Walmart steps forward and walks the talk, industry takes notice, and they've definitely taken notice. And so if we move a little bit beyond that, back to that office building slide that I showed there, that was showed up first. So here's a quick flyover of what we've seen happening in the last 3-4 years and some of the hurdles that have been crossed. This was our own office building, and we want to walk the talk too, but it was just a natural, it was a no-brainer for us to build with mass timber. But and we're in the office right now. It's a wonderful ambiance, and we're just loving it. But in this case here, this also became a little bit of a living laboratory in that we're doing active vibration testing. So we don't over-design wood. Wood can easily be over-designed if we're too conservative about the unknown vibration characteristics of wood. So we've tested, done extensive vibration testing. We'll do further ongoing testing here. There's thermodynamic testing happening on the wall systems. This is the first case where we actually built a firewall, a 2-hour rated firewall with wood. And finally, we also had to prove that we can build in a severe seismic zone like Vancouver and achieve a ductile seismic resisting system. And so we actually introduced some Tectonus connectors, the latest and greatest from New Zealand earthquake seismic technology, and introduced those with CLT shear walls. And so there's been a big learning curve here, and also once again just advancing the cause of mass timber. Next slide, please. Project. Next slide. Yeah. Here's a project, a mixed-use project in Cleveland, Ohio. The 9-story portion has just gone up. The 12-story office portion still awaits. The 9-story is 8 stories of residential and 1-story retail. And the big hurdle that we crossed here was we were able in the 9-story portion have 50% exposed mass timber. This is a big plus. So if it's just like head-on-head costs, sometimes you meet the you can come in at the equivalent cost of concrete or steel. Other times it's a little bit more, but if you can also expose the mass timber, this is just another big advantage that is speaks in favor of mass timber construction. So in this case, that was the case, and we've seen the 9-story now erected, and I think right now it may be the tallest mass timber building in the USA, but soon to be exceeded, of course, by the project in Milwaukee. Next slide, please. Here was a breakthrough project already from 3-4 years ago now. At the time, the tallest mass timber building in the world, student residence at the University of British Columbia, 17 stories mass timber and 1-story concrete. The big breakthrough here was not only coming up with a new system of mass timber, it was a point-supported system, so that we dispensed of all the beams, which really led to an efficient erection and efficient cost. And also, in this case here, it had to be, we weren't permitted to build more than 6 stories at the time, and the government permitted us then to build up under special circumstances and conditions that had to be met. We were allowed to build up to 18 stories high, which speaks to what's happening in the regulatory environment. More and more cases of where the AHJs, the authorities having jurisdiction, are permitting mass timber construction, both encapsulated and exposed. So that was a breakthrough in this one. Next slide, please. Now we're moving towards projects that are in the 12 to 22 story range. This is another student residence project, which is about to go to construction. And in this case here, we're actually moving away from a concrete core, and to even get more cost efficiency, we're going with the steel brace core. And as Don Davies already mentioned, looking at steel columns to put them into the, what would be narrower partition walls, demising walls between the various suites. And so another hurdle to cross was like looking at hybrid construction to really get the maximum cost efficiency going. So we're looking at that now for several projects within the 12 to 22 story range, which will soon be going to construction. Here then a 10-story mass timber building in the institutional sector, where we were exploring entire CLT construction for the floor system. So there's no wood beams in here. It's just composite concrete CLT slab bands, beams, if you like, that support CLT infill panels. So another step forward in exposed mass timber construction at the institutional level, and more institutions are expressing a desire to move in this direction too. And finally here, a 10-story office building, which just got regulatory approval once again, which features timber braces and also exposed mass timber construction in each office level. And so in summary, what I'd like to add, perhaps Peter, if I may, is just the key observations here in seeing mass timber become more mainstream. Our building authorities are adopting it increasingly. The building codes are catching up very quickly. It's a sustainable type of construction. The market is increasingly asking for this. Where it could be exposed, it offers a really warm ambiance, and this is becoming very attractive to the office sector, and it's proving cost competitive. The design community is catching up and becoming more fluent in the use of mass timber. And finally, when you have examples like Walmart building such a large amount of mass timber construction, it sets just a fantastic example. So there's a bit of a snapshot of where I see mass timber going, and seeing Walmart as a big springboard for that too.
Thanks so much, Paul. And if I could build upon what you've just identified, but also return back to a phrase from the Microsoft discussion, which is you can't manage it if you can't measure it. And I'm wondering, Joe, if you could talk about how Walmart is already measuring the use of this technology, and then how it plans to continue the measuring as you occupy the building in a sense of ongoing evaluation and metrics.
As Paul mentioned, we were rigorous in our evaluation, and we shipped some Southern Yellow Pine up to Hardy, and he manufactured the mock-up for us. And at first, when we got all the connections in, we thought, well, we've tested too many, and it really turned out to be a benefit, because through that mock-up process, we were able to, with the general contractor, kind of quantify everything in terms of making the most efficient setup. We have a really 30 by 30 bay. It's very modular, and we have, I guess, 4 different buildings and 3 different facades to apply to those. So there's a lot going on with dynamic glass to further help our sustainability. Really detailed commissioning of the systems with how we monitor the CLT. It's just not turning on the air conditioning. We have to be very thoughtful with that, but working through all of these places, and a highly coordinated process with Hardy and his group in terms of design for manufacturing and assembly. Where does it make the most sense to install some of these steel connectors that we have? Really thoughtful coordination with the general contractors, and it's really been a learning process. And I think that's the thing is, you have to really embrace the kind of unknowns for a while, and then work through it ahead of time in the schedule to make sure that we're really harvesting all the benefits of simplified construction, and coordinating the other trades and educating them as we come in and apply the rest of the systems to the building. So, I didn't mention it earlier, Dean McKeith, but we had 2 Walmart stores that were actually designed, and Hardy helped us permit one in California. Those projects were put on hold for other reasons, but we were ready to go and help with proof of concept. So we're doing the home office for it right now. We'll continue to evaluate, and we really like the flexibility and the, prototypes are something Walmart has really perfected and used to help drive our success over the years. And I think a lot of times that's when you can have your structural engineer and your design architect together early, kind of negotiating the owner's requirements for flexibility and a number of different uses. That's really an outstanding way to set yourself up for future success and flexibility as we monitor the progress in these future systems, as well as feedback from the associates. This is really about the associates having access to nature indoors as well as out on the new campus.
We have about 5 minutes, and I want to ask one further dimension of the metrics, the measuring, and this is really open for any one of you 3 to answer. If we've crossed the, let's call it the engineering gap in understanding how we can utilize these materials, we've crossed fire prevention, fire code certification, things like that. There are, I think, still questions to be answered for our audience, certainly about acoustic characteristics, about moisture characteristics. And here too, I have to think all 3 of you have had to consider these quality characteristics going forward. How are you measuring and incorporating these understandings into design?
Paul and I just spoke about this last week, and so since we have some friends that just moved into a facility, we're leaning on them heavily for experience. We actually, through the mock-up, are doing some testing, Peter, as we get it more complete with furniture and carpet in it. And so various levels of testing with acousticians, but also working with Paul Hardy and his other clients to understand best practices for which one will be most applicable to Walmart's use.
I think that's good to hear, and I think the hope, I think, for us all is that this information becomes available to all, right? That one of the chief characteristics that has been so appealing to me, the work that I'm doing with our students and on behalf of education more generally, has been that the forest economy, so to speak, is also a knowledge sharing economy, and there's a great deal to be learned from each other's experiences. Maybe I'd like to end on that note of collaboration and partnership, and ask each of you to highlight that dimension of your forward progress into the United States, into Arkansas, making use of mass timber more generally. Paul, can you comment upon collaboration and partnership as a key element of working in mass timber space?
Yeah, like I think Don Davis mentioned before too in his short comments that industry involvement right from the get-go, like having the mass timber supplier at the table, even having the general contractor, and if there's a concrete or steel component, having the steel fabricator at the table if it's going hybrid, have everybody there at the table at the outset, along with, of course, the entire design team. Have the mechanical engineers, they're so critical too, the electrical engineers. You have to be there right at the outset, integrating those systems successfully with the mass timber, so it all, like, particularly when it's exposed, it has to be right. And so the more you have that whole team at the table right from the outset, the more successful these projects have become. That's my experience.
That's great to hear. Hardy, from your perspective.
Yeah, I would add to what's been said here that the experiences that in the knowledge sharing that we see happen is really a multiplier effect. And a lot of people do their first mass timber building and they buffer the costs because it's new. But after they get through their first building, they realize how simple it is and how the kit of parts, if it's done right and if the right design and manufacturing is done, how simple these buildings are to put together. And the advice we always give is we try to keep it real. We let people know that when you're building with wood, yes, you have to be mindful of the elements. So just don't take advantage of the speed of construction that happens with mass timber, but have your exterior wall assemblies go up right behind so you keep the elements out. And we saw that in spades on the work that we did with the Brock Commons building that Paul Fast talked about. And we just see that happening on in almost all mass timber buildings that we're involved with. So it's very pragmatic, it's simple. A lot of the best practices from other techniques can be used here. And once people try it for the first time, they can move on to their next buildings quite effortlessly and get a lot of pickups in economics.
Excellent. And Joe, in conclusion, you've put up a slide here that I think that demonstrates the point, but could you expand a bit upon the partnerships and alliances that Walmart has made possible and is profiting from?
Yes, I believe that if I look back over our journey in mass timber, really it's a lot of conversations and it's a lot of education and dialogue. And I think you had Steve down to the U of A one time, and we had a lot of industry leaders from architects to engineers, maybe a general contractor, and a lot of introductions that we didn't know planting seeds back then would really come to this much of an opportunity. And I think continuing to challenge what's possible. And there were several times that any of us at this table could have said, well, this is too hard. And we continued to seek solutions and keep an open mind of learning and seeking help. And as you mentioned, it's been a knowledge economy and something that Hardy, we probably have received help from competitors in the past 2 months. And, we're going to be as open to share with those people interested in this new way of building and new way of, contributing to the environment as we continue our journey and, kind of keeping notes along the way of correction of errors. That's one of EDLC, EDLP, and we like to kind of be self-critical of how can we improve the next thing, because you never know when the next one will be required. So we're really trying to employ that. I showed earlier the visual mock-up, the mass timber mock-up, and it's only 0.5%. It's 11,000 square feet, but it's 0.5% of what we're doing on campus. So really taking those learnings and advancing those into the design and having teams like Paul and Hardy that are really agile to change a little bit and adjust where necessary as we learn. So communication is key, high expectations, and then like the team at Microsoft, we visited their campus. Monitoring everything along the way is so critical to achieving the success and the opportunity we have. So thankful for everyone doing their part and bringing the rest of us along as we've learned in this.
As well said, Joe, and I think as we turn towards the next phase of the entire webinar, it's important to acknowledge, as you have in this slide, just how the presence of the USDA, the U.S. Forest Services, Woodworks, Softwood Lumber Board, so many who are present here today in really assisting us in doing what we're doing at the state or the corporate level. Thanks to all three of you for your participation in this presentation. I'll turn this back over to Katie with thanks again for the invitation to moderate and participate.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Joe, Paul, Hardy, and Peter again. Wonderful. The emphasis on partnerships, the knowledge, the growth mindset, just really inspiring, the impact. I got to say, you guys sound like you know what you're doing. I love it. It's absolutely brilliant. And I love the word pragmatic too. As a Midwesterner, that's one of my favorite multiple syllable words. So thank you so much for everything that you shared, your insights and experiences, generously shared. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Be well.
So now we will take a brief break and again, take this time to reflect on what you've heard. And when we return, we will learn more about climate change and carbon science and mass timber trends. Then stay tuned, because we are also going to have a little time for networking and seeing what Hoppen can do to support making connections. See you in a few minutes.
If our structures will stand for generations, what do we want them to stand for? Are they merely shelter and workplaces? Or could they do more for us? Because while we have close relationships with buildings, we spend our days in them, they hold our families and belongings, we have a larger relationship with them too. They are foundational to our communities and cities, and how we build them has a profound effect on our planet. Wood meets this challenge. It stores carbon, offering the potential to remove millions of tons of CO2 every year. With exposed wood, people report lower stress and more productivity. And today, it can be built even taller, stronger, and safer. It shapes the form and function of what we make in ways we hadn't imagined before. Wood is part of a future more vibrant, sustainable, and sound. Our skylines reveal a history lived and lived in, and the parts we add to its whole form our legacy. Let's choose a better legacy.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you are feeling inspired and generating your own ideas of actions you can take to drive leadership for a climate-resilient built environment. The next part of our agenda will provide a little more depth of understanding of the carbon storage opportunities associated with the use of forest products and mass timber in the built environment and in innovative ways. Those of you familiar with the work of Dovetail Partners know how much we love brilliant scientists. And so allow me to welcome to the stage Edie Sani Hall. She will be addressing carbon science. Edie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Katie. What an incredible set of panel discussions today. My name is Edie Sani Hall, and I am speaking to you today from Washington State, where I spend as much spare time as I can hiking around in forests and looking at pretty views. I have been working on forest and wood product carbon accounting issues for over 20 years, believe it or not. So I so appreciate you giving space for the science side. But I have to say this has been a tall task. For me, having 10 minutes to explain the biogenic carbon cycle is like asking a novelist to write an essay using only half the alphabet. Oh, I'm sure it can be done, but it's just a lot harder. I had a hard time figuring out where to start. And now I'm probably 30 seconds in, and I still haven't defined biogenic carbon, embodied carbon, embedded carbon, removals, emissions, sources, sinks, net flux. There's a lot going on here. The good news is that some of these terms have already been defined. There's been a lot of talk about embodied carbon as well as emissions. And in this case, we're talking about putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and removals, which in this case is talking about taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. But I am going to try to keep this talk at a high level and to try to connect some of the carbon dots, if you will. My hope is that you come away from this talk with two big takeaways. One, the biogenic carbon cycle is fundamentally different than fossil fuel. And two, we absolutely can harness the power of trees through smart use of wood products such as mass timber. Next slide. So sometimes we get bogged down in the details. So I want to take a step back and affirm that we all ultimately share the same goals. We want a future and a present where we can provide for a growing population living well within the limits of the planet. To do that, we will need to double the amount of square footage that encompasses the existing building stock. We want to reduce atmospheric greenhouse gases to a level that keeps us under 1.5 degrees of warming. We want to have healthy, resilient, productive forests. And I think we can all agree to these goals. And we're here today to discuss how mass timber can potentially help us achieve these goals. However, connecting the carbon dots, or the carbon atoms in this case, from forest to frame or from frame to forest can sometimes get a little confusing. So what is biogenic carbon? Okay, in the upper left corner, we see an equation that may jog our memories from biology class. Very simply, biogenic carbon is the carbon that flows to and from the atmosphere through plants, the wonderful magic of photosynthesis. How does this fit in with atmospheric carbon dioxide? You've probably seen this Keeling graph that measures carbon dioxide in the atmosphere at Mauna Loa in Hawaii. And if you squint, you've seen the annual squiggly lines. Those are literally just the difference between leaves falling off, deciduous trees, and decomposing or emitting carbon dioxide, and trees growing the following late spring or summer and taking in carbon dioxide. At a landscape level, there are also large exchanges of carbon to and from the atmosphere. Trees remove carbon from the atmosphere when they grow, and they release upon combustion or decay. And these can be either naturally or human-induced. In any given year, all of these things are happening all across the landscape. In fact, the gross flux to and from land to the atmosphere is huge. Globally, gross photosynthesis is on the order of 123 gigatons of carbon, and gross fire and respiration is on the order of 119 gigatons of carbon. These fluxes are an order of magnitude more than annual fossil emissions, which are about 7 or 8 gigatons of carbon. So because that biogenic carbon cycle is a two-way street, it's really important to understand and quantify that net impact. Fossil carbon, as depicted on the right side of this diagram, is a one-way street. A gross emission is a net emission, and there is no natural return out of the atmosphere. Now, I want to turn your attention to the far left of this graph, which is an extension of the forest cycle. The International Panel on Climate Change describes this as the transfer of carbon dioxide originally sequestered by vegetation into a product pool, similarly to when carbon is transferred from a live tree to the little litter and soil carbon pools on land. So you saw that there was a lot of stuff going on in that last wonderful graph made by the US Forest Service. And a lot of times we're only focused on one part of that cycle, either the forest or the frame. So when we look at this in silos, we have this danger of sub-optimization. We have our sights set on the wrong peak, if you will. So how can we sift through the noise? This is a systems graph that addresses possible feedback loops associated with increased mass timber use. We have a pretty good understanding that mass timber buildings have less embodied carbon, meaning they take less energy to manufacture, than equivalent buildings made of other material. We also know that the carbon embedded or stored in a mass timber wood product extends the storage of carbon out of the atmosphere during the building's lifetime. Now, both of these values can change in the future depending on energy sources for both wood and concrete or steel manufacturing, and depending on end-of-life assumptions. But the directional result, as in using more, likely will have less greenhouse gases in the atmosphere relative to building with something else, should stay the same. But what happens to the forest with increasing mass timber use? This is what everybody wants to know. Well, the forest has a lot of things going on that influence it. And it's important to understand that there's the impact of demand for wood products on forest management, as well as the impacts of other land pressure, in addition to the impacts of natural and climate risks, such as fire and insects. And in many cases, demand for wood products can create a positive feedback loop with a result of more carbon in the forest and more forest products being used. This has been true at a global level. Countries with the highest levels of harvest for forest product production also have the most stable or increasing carbon stocks. The same is true in the US. From 1952 to just before the Great Recession, harvest levels in the US increased 35%, and forest inventory increased by even more, by 50%. Now, the future trend is actually unclear, though not because of harvest, but perhaps because of lack of harvest. Harvest has been trending slightly downward, and mortality in US forests has increased since the 1980s. In fact, the greatest risk to carbon in the US forests are fire and insect disturbances that appear to be exacerbated by climate. And Chief Moore talked about this a lot earlier today, as well as a risk of land use change pressure, mainly for development. So back to the overall strategy for how to reduce overall atmospheric greenhouse gas emissions. The International Panel on Climate Change has consistently recommended an approach that enhances all parts of the system. Take more carbon out of the atmosphere and store in both forests and wood products, and equally important, reducing emissions to the atmosphere by reducing land use change, increasing forest resilience, and product substitution. By priming the sequestration pump, if you will, through wood buildings, in addition to substitution benefits, you can have a positive feedback loop to the forest, resulting in reduced deforestation, more forests, and better forest resiliency and productivity. We will reach the top of the mountain together. Thanks so much for your time, and back to you, Katie.
Thank you, Edie. And you did it. You wrote that novel with half the alphabet. I love it. It's good to know that while there's always going to be questions, scientific questions keep going, we already know a lot about the environmental, social, and economic benefits of forest products and the potential for them to be part of immediate and urgent climate solutions. Thank you for your work and for your expertise. Much appreciated, Edie. So with that, we're nearing the end of our time together, but not without a final speaker and, as I said, a networking opportunity as well. So I hope that the energy that you're feeling from these presentations will carry into your networking before we close. But before we do that, allow me to introduce Jennifer Cover, President and CEO of WoodWorks, a partner for this event and a source of incredible educational events and resources like this that support innovation. Jennifer will tell us more about trends in mass timber and WoodWorks' proven ability to provide project assistance. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katie. Well, this has definitely been an exciting and informative day so far. Our presenters today have done a tremendous job of sharing with you the key motivators that drew them to mass timber, as well as clearly outlining all the benefits that they discovered by selecting wood as their material of choice. If you are feeling inspired and motivated to explore the use of mass timber, or really any wood solution, on your next building project, we're here to help at no cost. I lead a nonprofit program called WoodWorks that is staffed with sustainably minded engineers and architects who are committed to helping their peers learn how to build with structural materials that will decrease the carbon footprint of our built environment and help improve the health of our nation's forests. We have highly technical field staff locally available throughout the country, ready to help you get started. You can reach any of these folks on our website at woodworks.org. They are knowledgeable in all areas of wood design and construction and can provide no-cost project assistance on anything from helping you navigate the applicable building codes, helping you evaluate the most economical structural system layout when converting your project to wood, to proper detailing to achieve the specific acoustic performance you're seeking, all the way through to installation and construction best practices. And you most certainly will not be the first to be embarking on this mass timber journey. This is a well-established and understood building approach that has been around in Europe for several decades, and we are really starting to see it take off here in the US. There are currently over 1,200 projects that have been constructed or that are in design utilizing mass timber. This trend is growing exponentially, and the opportunity to positively impact our environment is growing with it. How great would it be if we can change the story around climate change for the next generation just by being more cognizant of the materials we choose to build with? And thanks to advancements in the building codes, it's now possible to design up to 18 stories with mass timber within the prescriptive building code itself, and even taller when utilizing the performance-based approach. And this is where we can really start to see the scaled carbon benefits that wood solutions can bring to our built environment. The Ascent project that is shown here is going up right now in Milwaukee. It's 25 stories, 19 of which are mass timber. When complete, it will be the tallest wood structure in the world. And the developer, Newland Enterprises, is not alone in exploring these innovative solutions. The Woodworks team is currently providing assistance to design teams on 122 tall wood projects across the country. It's just a matter of time before we start to see timber skylines everywhere in the US. Now, if you're a developer and you're curious how to find and build out a design team, check out the Woodworks Innovation Network, where you can find information on projects as well as connect with construction teams and designers, as well as material suppliers on projects. So when you're ready to try your first mass timber project, Woodworks is here to help. You also have an opportunity coming up next to connect with other participants, technical experts, and speakers. We may not be able to be together in person, but that doesn't mean you have to miss out on making new connections. So with that, I hope you will join me for the speed networking that is about to start. See you over there in a few minutes. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Jennifer. The impact of the Woodworks team is truly impressive. Now it is time to connect and network. We'll play a brief video that provides the details on how it works. If you're already familiar with the hop-in experience, then you know how user-friendly it is. We'll play that instructional video, and when you're ready, you'll click on networking on your screen and you'll be ready to go in the speed networking. Please note that as shown in the video, you always remain in control of your experience. So give it a try, have fun, and we'll see you back here for a few closing comments afterwards. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the opportunity to network, and maybe you saw some familiar faces and met a few new ones as well. Before we close for the day, I want to thank you for attending and invite you to contribute your time and talents to being a leader for the built environment. Join us in advancing the opportunities with mass timber. As you've heard today, there is great work underway, and sustainability is about partnerships. If you're looking for resources and information to support your work, to connect with others, to learn more, please look to the event partners, including Think Wood, with answers and information on all aspects of mass timber construction. Woodworks, with information about projects throughout the country and free technical assistance to help you include wood with your next project. USDA Forest Service, learn about forests across the country, all 765 million acres of them. Net Impact, join a grassroots global movement for positive impact for people and planet. Impact Finance Center, understand impact investing, align assets and values, and support social ventures. And Dovetail Partners, our library of reports addresses a full range of sustainability and material selection topics and insights. Consider yourself invited to reach out, engage, and be a leader for the built environment. Have a wonderful rest of your day, afternoon, or evening. Thank you.